Watch us streaming live over YouTube. You just go to Hot News Talk Radio on YouTube, and you can watch us streaming live, where we're hanging out over the air live every weekday here on Hot News Talk Radio. We have a lot of lot of great programs here on Hot News Talk Radio as well. There's Imus in the Morning. There's Laura Ingram. Sean Hannity's here on Hot News Talk Radio. Nuganomics.com with David Toulis is here on Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Now at 5 o'clock, where we talk about the local, the regional, and the national news from me, your news director here at Hot News Talk Radio. Sean Hannity is on as well. And there's Cowboy Up with Tex every weekday here from 6 to 7, where Tex talks about the local and national events. And he's a very connected guy, very well informed, does tons and tons of show prep. Probably the second most amount of show prep is what he does. And David Toulis of Nuganomics.com does the most. There's no questioning that. The guy comes in with a briefcase full of papers. He's got like 10 books lined up in front of him. The guy does more show prep than any other person on radio ever, I guarantee you. He does crazy amounts of show prep. I don't do that much, which is kind of the weird thing, because it's all sort of stream of consciousness, I guess is what you might. It's all stream of consciousness. I have tons and tons of articles open that just aren't in paper form, so it doesn't look like I've done nearly as much as I actually have, because it's all on my phone. But that's how we do it here at Hot News Talk Radio. That's AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. It's seeming like the DOJ and the DHS and what's the other one, DARPA, are wanting to create a super soldier of some sort, because we keep seeing all these different technologies coming out that are, on the one hand, really weird and really freaky, kind of scary, and on the other hand, they're kind of cool too, because that's what we're seeing here with this organic ion transistor, which is blocking pain signals from reaching the brain. So it's a new type of medical device that could one day put the minds of chronic pain sufferers at ease by distributing the body's own natural pain relief signals at just the right time. Developed at Linköping University in Sweden, the tiny ion pump is made from organic electronics and can be implanted into patients, serving to cut off pain signals in the spinal cord before they make their way to the brain, according to Gizmag. So with this device, they can cut off pain signals that go to your brain. So essentially, it's like a organic, well, it's already organic, I suppose, but it's sort of like a painkiller that doesn't require you to take a pill. So similar to the way a pacemaker delivers electric pulses to correct an abnormal heartbeat, the ion pump would send out neurotransmitters to prevent pain signals from reaching the brain. The difference is that instead of using electrodes to send pure electrical signals, the device is built with biologically compatible materials and sends chemical signals that better integrate with our internal systems, kind of like a chemical transistor. The idea is that the device stimulates the body's pain alleviators, and that intervenes as pain signals travel through the spinal cord to the brain. The researchers put the pump to work in conscious, freely moving rats, and it was engineered to send out the pain-relieving neurotransmitter aminobutyric acid, or GABA, to 4 separate locations where damaged nerves met the spinal cord. It was found to successfully block pain signals from reaching the brain and had 0 side effects. That's kind of the funny thing about pain, too, is sometimes you have pain even though there's actually not anything wrong with you, if that makes any sense at all. Like, chronic pain sufferers can suffer from that simply because of a pinched nerve, even though there's not any actual damage to the person themselves. So this device could help out those people quite a lot, much better than, deadening a nerve or what have you. So this is a much better way of doing things than what we have been doing in the past, it would seem. So very exciting new developments coming out in the field of pain killing. Now, the NSA has been doing quite a few different bizarre, disturbing, strange, illegal things. And that's kind of the key word there, is illegal. You see, what the NSA has been doing for forever now is illegal. Or at least it's forever from me, because I grew up post 9/11. And actually, I guess I'm technically still growing up post 9/11. So I don't really know much of anything about the pre-9/11 world. People keep talking about how there's, the post-9/11 such and such. That's all I know is post-9/11. So I'm not too familiar with the whole pre-9/11 world, because I really didn't exist in it for more than 6 years. So I can't really tell you a whole lot about pre-9/11. But post-9/11, we have constant infringement of our rights, and we have a very ridiculous intelligence society that tells us constantly that they're doing the right thing, even though they're infringing on our rights. And I'm not sure how you can be doing the right thing if it's the wrong thing. Like, we can all agree that an infringement of the Fourth Amendment is wrong, right? That an infringement of the First Amendment is wrong, right? So we can pretty much all agree on that. And yet, for some reason, there are people who will defend the NSA. I'm not sure how they pull that off. You keep seeing people who will just defend the NSA, and I don't know how they do that. So it's a very, very strange circumstance that we have here, where people will defend the NSA even though they're doing things that are blatantly illegal and furthermore blatantly wrong. So I'm not sure how anyone could ever defend the NSA. So to summarize the different rights which are being infringed by the NSA, number one is actually the First Amendment. Interestingly enough, and I'll explain why. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, obviously, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, notice that the freedom of speech or of the press. Now, people are less likely to talk about this agency, knowing that they could come under fire for discussing all the different things that are held within the NSA. Well, think about Edward Snowden, how he's become so persecuted because he's been pointing out truths that occur within the NSA. So that's an infringement of his First Amendment rights. Now, you have your First Amendment rights regardless of whether or not you're an American or not. Now, that's kind of an odd concept for a lot of people, but the whole idea of the Bill of Rights was that everyone should have these rights, not just Americans. So it drives me crazy when people talk about how, well, terrorists, Arabs don't have rights because they're not American. It doesn't work that way, and I can guarantee you that any of the founders would slap you over the head for saying that people who aren't Americans don't have the same rights as Americans, because that just makes no sense. Because it even says in the Constitution that the rights don't come from the piece of paper; the rights come from on high. So it's kind of silly when people talk about how the foreigners don't have the same rights as us. Well, actually, yeah, they do. It's just that you're infringing them. They do still have them. Well, another right that's constantly being infringed by the NSA is the fourth one: the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, that's not a subpoena. Notice that. It's a warrant, not a subpoena, that you have to have in order to search through somebody's personal effects, papers, what have you. They're not getting warrants, they're getting subpoenas. When we're talking about the mass metadata sweeping seizure of papers and effects, we're not talking about warrants being issued. We're talking about subpoenas. So they're taking your information very much illegally. And I'm not sure how anyone can defend that either. Now, Marco Rubio committed basically political suicide when he tried to defend the NSA the other day. I don't know what he's thinking, but that blew anything I ever thought of him right out the window. I mean, there's no way now. He basically committed political suicide. Anyone who would ever defend the NSA is going to commit political suicide. Nobody likes the NSA. That's another big problem with a lot of the people who are in power right now, particularly Mitch McConnell and John McCain and Lindsey Graham. They keep shooting themselves in the foot politically because they keep defending all these different programs, and you really shouldn't be doing that. I'm not sure where they're getting their ideas from. Well, I mean, I know where they're getting their ideas from. They're stringent, strong supporters of the military intelligence complex that we have now. Well, the NSA has named one of its top secret programs Skynet, which makes it really, really disturbing of its own right that it's called Skynet, but it gets even weirder. According to The Verge, Skynet is real. According to the latest report from Glenn Greenwald's site, The Intercept, the NSA has, or at least had, a secret program which is called Skynet. Unlike the Terminator version, which has a computer system that went rogue and attempted to annihilate all of humanity with nuclear bombs and with giant cool-looking robots that happen to talk in an Austrian accent for no reason, the NSA's Skynet uses metadata to try and identify people with terrorist connections. Specifically, in one recorded case, the program tracked the movements of people within Pakistan from cell phone records and raised a flag when those activities appeared to match the movements of suspected al-Qaeda couriers. By sniffing out couriers, the hope was to catch dangerous al-Qaeda leaders. Now, this might sound like something that's all fine and dandy, especially because these people are non-Americans and they're Pakistani, so obviously they don't have the same rights, right? That's not how it works, but you have to keep in mind that they're blatantly asking you to sacrifice your liberties in order to get security, which is something that we're definitely not supposed to do. And I'm not sure how anyone could ever defend that idea, that we need to sacrifice all of our liberties in order to be safe. This is about protecting the American people. That's what all the intelligence agency guys will tell you, is that this is all about protecting the American people. Now, there might be someone out there who truly does believe that, the poor sap. But that's not what it's about. Mostly, it's probably about filling the pockets of contractors who different senators are on the board of these different contractors. That's probably one big reason. Another reason, of course, is market control. And another reason is some sort of bizarre religious ideology that these people have, where they see the Arab Peninsula as this religious battleground, and it's totally ridiculous. But it's unclear if this program was successful, Skynet, but its algorithms flagged high-profile Al Jazeera journalist Ahmed Mufak Zaidan, and he has categorically denied all of these claims. He's now been put on a terrorist watch list, by the way. He's a journalist who's been put on a terrorist watch list. He's an Al Jazeera journalist. He has categorically denied these claims. The news network's Islamabad bureau chief is known for having sources within Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and has interviewed key members of those groups in the past, including Osama bin Laden himself. By virtue of being a journalist covering those groups, it should come as a little surprise that his movements would appear suspect on the surface. But keep in mind, he's a journalist. Just like if I had the opportunity, I would be interviewing people in the Hells Angels, right? So that would make me suspect now. Well, think about, back in the 60s when you had Hunter S. Thompson, right? One of my favorite writers, one of my favorite journalists. He did gonzo journalism, very interesting, very funny stuff. And he was embedded, you might say, with the Hells Angels, and he wrote a whole book about it. And he may or may not have been flagged in some international punch card database back in the 60s and 70s as a potential Hells Angels affiliate or potential Hells Angels sympathizer. Had this program been put in place back then, he probably would have been killed in a drone strike, and there would be no more Hunter S. Thompson books. What a tragedy that would be. We would never get Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. We'd never get the Rum Diaries, all these different cool things. And what was it? Fear and Loathing on the Presidential Trail 72, I'm going to say? I can never remember. And he was also a sheriff at one point, I think. Very, very strange life Hunter S. Thompson had. He killed himself a few years ago. I think 2006 is when he did. And he might have been flagged as some sort of hyper-terrorist sympathizer and blown up in a drone strike if he ever went to the Middle East. It's just ridiculous, all these different programs that we have that really don't serve the public in any meaningful way, despite what they keep trying to convince us. And the people who would defend these programs obviously don't understand how personal liberties work. They obviously don't understand how the American system is supposed to work, where you're innocent until proven guilty. Notice that word, proven guilty. Unless you're having been tried in a court of law, you're not proven guilty. That's not how it works. You have to be proven guilty in a court of law in order to be executed or in order to be punished for your crime. So you can't just blow up people who are American citizens because they may or may not be affiliated with terrorists. They have to be tried in a court. It's supposed to work that way. But these people are totally circumventing that whole system. They're being very anarchistic in their ways of operation, in their modus operandi. They're very anarchistic, and it's quite disturbing that we have these people who are trying to enforce the ideals of rule of law and all these sorts of things when they will completely ignore the law in and of itself. They'll just completely ignore how the law works because they really don't care at this point. That's the funny thing. They just don't care how the law works at this point. It's just so ridiculous how we have people who are constantly defending the system. We have people who are constantly defending, the cops, and they say, well, cops aren't all bad. It's just that sometimes they're put in very high stress situations. That's totally outside the point. The point is that the system is immoral. The system is wrong, so they shouldn't even be working for the system in the first place. It's no wonder that terrible abuses are committed when the system encourages you to commit terrible abuses. It's kind of obvious at that point that the system is wrong, and individuals who would work for that system are inherently wrong in that regard as well, whether they realize it or not. Again, the Nuremberg excuse doesn't really work. You might not be familiar with the Nuremberg excuse, the Nuremberg argument, which was different higher-ups in the Nazi regime claimed that they couldn't really take responsibility for their actions that took place during World War II because they were under orders. So it was determined in that court that's not a viable excuse. Just following orders and just doing your job is not a viable excuse for human rights abuses or for any other rights abuses. So say you're a policeman and at some point the order comes from on high that you have to start shooting at protesters because that's what's been ordered. Well, that's obviously not the right thing to do, to fire upon peaceful protesters. So you are guilty of firing upon peaceful protesters. You can be charged in a court for pulling that trigger, despite the fact that you're just following orders, because that's how it works. That's how it's always supposed to have worked. You are the person who committed that action. You're the person who went through and followed through with that action. Thus, you're guilty of that crime, no matter what the orders were. And that's how it's supposed to work, and that's how it always has worked. And that argument was totally thrown out the window. It was a final death throw from the former Nazis who didn't really understand how law worked. Unfortunately, the people who were trying them did. So it's ridiculous that people will say, well, you know, they're just doing their job, just following orders. That's not a legitimate excuse. You know, people who would work for the NSA can definitely be held morally accountable for their actions. They are definitely infringing upon people's rights, and they can definitely be held accountable for that. Anyone who would ever say that, well, they're just doing their job, doesn't really understand how law works. Because even if you are just doing your job, if your job requires you to do something which is wrong, immoral, or infringing upon someone's rights, you are guilty of that, regardless of whether or not you're following orders. So it's quite ridiculous when you keep hearing people making these arguments for them, saying that, well, they're just doing their jobs. You know, their jobs are just to infringe on our rights, and we have to support them and respect them. You know, I don't support them. I don't respect them because what they do is wrong. The system they work for is wrong. So I have no reason to respect them or support them. It's as simple as that. Well, this NSA program called Skynet is working to make criminals out of everyone, is seeking to make a suspect out of basically anybody, despite the fact that you have freedom of association, which is another right actually that's being infringed upon you, because you do have that right of association. That's kind of funny too, is people will tell you all day, well, you know, you hang out with terrorists, you're going to be flagged as a terrorist. And yet you have the right to associate. So I guess that one's thrown out the window as well. It's just wrong what goes on. It's utterly wrong. And it's amazing to me that nobody's pointing that out in the media, right? In the larger media. I don't want to say mainstream media because I don't know if that's really a thing. But in the media at large, nobody's willing to point out that the system itself is wrong and flawed, because obviously they're not going to do that because they have people who work with them and for them who are part of that system. They actively support that system by talking about all the different presidential candidates and interviewing them and all that nonsense. So you're never going to hear about this on cable news or mainstream news or what have you, only here.
This is a mob mode. This is a mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am?
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better than new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great, supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
Hot News Talk 1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. The defense resting its case in the penalty phase of the trial of Boston Marathon bomber Johar Tsarnaev.
The defense ending with the testimony of nationally known death penalty opponent Sister Helen Prejean. She said she met with Johar Tsarnaev 5 times, and that according to her, Tsarnaev spontaneously and sincerely agreed that the Boston Marathon bombing victims did not deserve to suffer like they did.
Fox Radio's Bill Marcus, the prosecution calling rebuttal witnesses, then closing arguments, the jury to decide if Tsarnaev gets the death penalty or life in prison. Nashville, Arkansas officials now say a tornado killed a young couple in their mobile home while their young daughter survived. In Van, Texas, the search goes on for 10 people after last night's tornado. It helped launch her career in 2002.
Kelly Clarkson.
Fox says next year will be American Idol's 15th and last season. Ratings have fallen since their peak in 2006. Fox News, we report, you decide.
People will sometimes tell you that that the law is always right. You know, that the law is always right. Whenever it comes down to you have to follow the law, whether it's wrong or right, you know what, doesn't really matter because you got to follow the law, whether it's moral or not. And that's a totally ridiculous statement, obviously, because it makes no sense for one, and also it's incorrect. But think about this. You know, there are wrong laws. There are laws which are immoral. That's kind of obvious at that point, right? Like, we all know that there are laws which are immoral. Okay, think about this one. And this might not be one that even occurs to you because it doesn't to a lot of people. But think about this one. Speeding laws. Laws against speeding on the highway. Now, yeah, we can say that if you crash into somebody and injure them or harm their property, now that is wrong. There's no questioning that. And there are actually laws against that. Destruction of property, attempted manslaughter, vehicular manslaughter, all these different things. There are laws in place to account for that. But the simple act of passing an arbitrary number, which somebody in the state or feds or the city council decided is the proper number, is that really a sin? Is that a wrong thing to do, to speed on the highway? Everybody's done it. Unless you somehow have a car which cannot go faster than 35 miles per hour, you have probably sped at some point. So is it really right to give people some sort of awful punishment, be it monetary or physical, for doing something that's not really wrong? You know, after all, the punishment should fit the crime. So if I've gone 5 over, let's say the speed limit is 55, like it is over on Highway 153. The speed limit is 55 and I go 60 because I'm in a hurry, or even I'm going 60 because I'm going with the flow of traffic, and I get pulled over and I get fined $50. Now, that's $10 for every mile per hour over the limit that I went. Is that really a crime or a punishment that's fitting to the crime? Not really. $50 for going over an arbitrary number, even though I've harmed nobody, and actually everyone else was kind of doing it anyway. That's not really a punishment that fits the crime, and thus is unjust, thus is wrong. It's morally wrong. So there's not really any clear argument for laws against speeding. I can't really find any of them. Well, people say that it protects the public. Well, laws aren't supposed to protect the public. It doesn't work that way. Laws are supposed to punish somebody after a crime has been committed, right? That's like the whole idea of law enforcement, is that they enforce the law after a crime has been committed. You know, crime prevention is actually not their job, believe it or not. You know, it's actually not their job to prevent laws from being broken. After all, if they did that, they'd lose all of their revenue stream. So actually, one could even argue that they want you to break the law, but I haven't really seen that many examples of that. Although I have seen videos where they will dare you to break the law, which is kind of interesting. So to anyone who would ever say that laws are always just, that laws are always right, especially in the United States, I point out the 18th Amendment, which is an utterly ridiculous and immoral law that makes no sense and really only benefited the wrong people. The 18th Amendment of the United States Constitution, the prohibition of alcohol. Section 1. After 1 year from the ratification of this article, the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors within the importation thereof unto or the exportation thereof in the United States and all territory, blah, 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 it's prohibited. Prohibition. We have a caller. Hey, caller, you're on the air. What's up?
You know why you have to pay a penalty for speeding?
Wait. You're going to have to call back. I can't hear you. Your phone's all screwed up. Thank you. Hate it when that happens. Cell phones, man, they always screw up. It's funny though. I think there is one cell tower around here that just totally messes up. Here we go. There we go. Hey, man, you any better?
Okay, so do you know why you have to pay a penalty for speeding?
Why?
Because you agreed to it.
Good point.
Traffic laws have nothing to do with the Constitution. They have to do with you agreeing to it under what's called implied consent.
Right.
And you get the license, which is permission to do something that would otherwise be illegal. You agree to all rules and regulations of the road as though you're in or engaging a commercial enterprise. Now, the question becomes, if you don't have a driver's license and never had one, can you be charged under the statute that governs operating a motor vehicle? I contend you can't, because you didn't voluntarily enter into that regulatory system. So one can't complain they got fined for speeding when they agreed to it. It's just we have to stop agreeing to things. See, this is what makes the difference. What's the difference between this nation and every other nation, this constitutional republic, is you are actually born free, believe it or not. If your parents don't give you a slave number at birth, a social security number, you're free. It's the things we do, the things we engage in, that take away our freedom a little bit at a time, and we normally do it voluntarily through deception. Oh, get a social security number to get benefits and get a job. Oh, get this license, get this permit. And what you're doing is little by little whittling away your individual rights and your freedom. It's our actions that put us into this statutory area, govern our lives, and whittle away our individual freedom.
Okay, riddle me this, Batman, because you seem to be a little bit smarter about law than I am. Is a contract invalid if the person signing doesn't understand the contents thereof?
Yeah, well, yes and no. First of all, you have to have full disclosure in all contracts.
Right.
Secondly, it's assumed that if you sign the contract, it's a matter of law, that you understood everything that's in there, or why would you sign it? But it all depends. It depends on your mental capability. That's
Sure.
why a contract is invalid for anyone under 18. But if you're over 18 and your mental capacity is considered normal, then almost always will that contract be enforced unless it's shown it was done out of fraud. You can't say I didn't understand what the contract is. I write contracts. I don't let attorneys write my contracts. And the reason for that is attorneys are purposely ambiguous. I say attorneys are ambiguous for the purpose of being litigious. In English, they specifically are unclear when they draft contracts, so they can litigate the meaning of the contract. You never ever sign a contract unless the meaning is clear. So the only debate regarding the contract is whether or not you fulfilled it.
Right, and
give
yourself a few days to read it over too, because there's no shame in wanting to think things over before you sign it too.
I've been in situations where I've had the other side say, "Well, this is a standard contract." I'm like, "Not for me, it's not. This is unclear. This is not standard for me." In here it says this. What does that mean? Well, it means this, or it could mean that. No. If it isn't absolutely clear, using clear, simple English language that a sixth grader can understand, I don't sign it.
Okay, well, while I have you, I want to ask you this one too. Because a contract is invalid if the person signing it is under the age of 18 and thus can't give consent, how do you think about, or what do you think about the licenses which are issued to people who are 15 or 16? Wouldn't that then be invalid?
No, because a license is not a contract. Because a license is permission to do something that would otherwise be illegal. So the police state says this activity is illegal, and we're going to grant permission or privilege based on you following the rules and regulations that govern it under this statute. And they can do that to a 12, 13, 14-year-old. It has nothing to do with signing the contract. You're engaged in an activity that would be illegal unless the state says it's legal.
Right.
It's totally different than doing something for money. The driver's license has nothing to do with doing it for money. Well, it actually does, because you're doing it in commerce. They lied and said that individuals are covered under it. But typically a contract is you're contracting with another individual. You're not contracting with the state.
Right, and surely surely revenue plays a big part in collecting a driver's license as well. They make tons of money off of that.
Well, then the question becomes, how can your parents, without your consent, go to the federal government and issue you a license that diminishes your status as a free man of the state?
Right, yeah, that's why I don't understand.
No one's been able to answer.
Yeah, I don't understand that about the Social Security system, because I didn't ask for this. I didn't want any of this, but now there's all these obligations implied with it. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, on top of that, there's no way to get out. I mean, there's something called a Title V administrative rescission, but they'll ignore it.
Yeah,
there's literally, if your parents enslave you with a federal number, because that's what it is. It's an enslavement. It's an enfranchisement. You've now done something the founders didn't want, which is now you have a relationship with the federal government. And the founders didn't want that. The founders wanted that your relationship to be with the state and local governments, and only states and foreign entities would have a relationship with the federal government, not you.
Right.
Now, what have your parents done? Your parents have basically put chains on you for your rest of your life and said, I'm deciding that my child is yours now. It's Caesar's. Your parents, when they get you that number, have given you to Caesar. They've given you that federal enfranchisement.
I would argue
you're no longer a number. I mean, you're no longer a person. You're a legal fiction. You're a fiction of law.
I would argue that they've done something much worse than give you to Caesar, though, because the implications are much, much worse, because now it's eternal servitude and theft of all your money. Or at least under Caesar, you could reasonably go into hiding. There wasn't any sort of system to find you.
I can tell you, 50 years ago, people would cringe at the idea of giving their Social Security number out to anyone, because on the back of the card it said, for Social Security purposes only, not for identification.
It still says
and that was because when they were debating the idea of Socialist security, which, by the way, was ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. That's an interesting decision. Hitler was issuing people numbers, and Americans said, we're fighting against this. We don't want numbers. We're fighting against this fascism. They said, oh, no, this is only for when you get old, that you'll have a number where you can collect benefits. They said, well, okay. And 20 or 30 years ago, people would say, well, I'm not giving that number to my child in a hospital. That's when they go to work, when they're 16 or 17 or 18, that number. And now, what do people say to you? Oh, your kid doesn't have a number when they were born? How did you get away with that without giving them a number at birth? Now it's, how did you get away with that?
Right. It's kind of like well, I'll give you a situation similar to that, since we're having such a fun legal discussion now. A situation that's similar to that is when we're talking about the Selective Service, where people will say, well, how'd you get away with not signing the Selective Service? I don't have to. They're forcing me to sign a contract that I don't agree with, so I'm not going to sign it. Simple as that.
Yeah, no state shall impede or impair the obligation of contract under the 14th Amendment. You're not required to do that. Yeah. I'm 57. I never signed up for the Selective Service. How can you claim that I'm free, then compel me to do something?
Right. Yeah.
That's beyond me. How can I go to jail for doing or not doing something? And then the next breath you're saying, "Oh, you're a free American."
Well, let me tell you.
Stupid.
Let me tell you. Freedom isn't free. You got to sign contracts to be free.
What's interesting is the preamble to the Constitution says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, give the states the Constitution." So the people formed the government and gave it to the states. The government didn't create itself.
No.
Nor are these individuals elected and are hired to oversee and perpetuate the growth of fascist, Marxist, socialist, communist welfare state, anything but your employees. But people will say, how did you get away with that? because it used to be God, man, and government. Now it's government, man, and God, maybe somewhere is on the bottom.
Right.
So I'm glad that you guys are bringing up the idea of what the country is supposed to be like as envisioned by the founders. And we have to separate contract, voluntary, involuntary, manipulation, subversion, and perversion. But, one thing people never talk about, Russell, and that is we are under occupation.
Sure.
And they did it subvertly. So right now in Washington, D.C., the occupiers are imposing their I'll use the term federalism, which isn't true federalism. They're federalism upon the individuals in the state. This is no different than the Russians taking over in 1968 or the Chinese in 1948. We are under occupation and lawlessness. There is no law. Now, people would say, well, no, I can't kill somebody again. Well, that's not law. That's common law. That's customs and usages.
Right.
You don't need anything written down to indict you for killing someone. Under the common law, the people would do that.
Well, even under biblical law, too.
There is no law, which means a set of standard rules and practices like the Ten Commandments that bind you from harming one another.
Right.
Law is dead in America as far as the government's concerned. They do whatever they want to do when they want to do it. That is the occupiers. And the only way to change that is for people to say, no, I'm done with you. Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Independents, we're done with you. You're supposed to work 11 months out of the year and go to Washington for a couple of weeks to straighten things out. But hiring a professional lawmaker whose job is to make laws, you can't have it both ways. You can't claim to be free and then pass a law.
Right, and I think a big part of this too is the perception that's willfully given to us in a lot of mainstream news sources. Well, they keep using phrases like a lawmaker, and they'll have op-eds where they'll defend NSA and all these sort of ridiculous things. It's really not helping out the situation any.
Well, that's because the education system was taken over 110 years ago here in this republic.
I wouldn't know about
that.
By
1905, it was taken over by 5 major media sources and the Marxists that now run this country. If you want to know how communist you are, look at the Communist Manifesto, and there are 10 planks. And
right.
If you agree with one of those planks, you're 10% communist. If you agree with 10% of all of it, you're 100% communist. And communism is in direct opposition to liberty and freedom. Direct opposition.
Yeah, it has to be. So, and people talk to me all the time, and they say, "Well, don't you support public education?" No, I'm not a product of public education, so obviously I don't.
It's not public education. It's government schools.
Sure.
That's why there's no prayer there, because the First Amendment literally prohibits the government from doing that. The government is not allowed to invoke a prayer in one of their institutions. It's the government. Now, now, people will look back in the old days. Well, I remember when I was a kid growing up, they would pray in school. That's because initially all schools were run by the churches. The government didn't start taking over schools to the 1900s.
Right, either the churches or by just the communes. By churches or just the towns who decide to hire a schoolmaster.
Yeah, well, it's no different than there were never marriage licenses. Do you have a birth license or a birth certificate?
I have a certificate.
Birth certificate. You don't need permission to get born. So people, when they were married, went before God, a man and a wife, because 2 men and 2 women cannot marry. Sorry, can't happen in this republic, even by statute. Bob and Jill went before God, church and family. They asked the blessings of the Lord, which now 2 becomes 1 in the eyes of God. Then they filed that certificate, which is legal recognition of an act, in their Bible at home and at the courthouse.
Right, simple as that.
The government then said, we're going to turn this into a license, permission to do something that would otherwise be illegal. And for you to marry, you have to get permission from us. Well, guess what? If you don't have a certificate of marriage and just a license, and you didn't do it under the eyes of God, you're not married. You have a civil union, but you're not married. Because words mean something. They mean something.
Yeah, it's such a simple concept. But anyway, we have a lot to get to here on the show, so thank you for your call. So the basic idea, though, that we keep facing is the government control of basically everything, and this is not something that's a fringe idea that you'll hear about on the shortwave independent radio stations with the guy with the really thick Southern accent who's yelling about judgment and damnation and how it's all coming down, and the gods, the angels are going to come down and they're going to judge us for our constant denial of his word, and if we don't do what he says, he's going to come down with his sword of fire and smite us all. It's not like that. It's an actual real occurrence that is happening here. where there actually is something real that's happening, where there's constant control that's inching its way in. The camel in the tent is my favorite analogy, where the guy's sitting in his tent and it's cold outside, right? And the camel can handle it, right? But the camel sticks its nose in and says, "Please, it's cold out. Just my nose needs to be warm. Let me have my nose in." And the guy says, "Well, I'm not really supposed to do this, but okay, fine." And then the camel inches its way in and in and in, further and further, until the guy's outside. Now the camel's inside the tent, nice and warm, and now you're getting screwed over. And that's exactly what's happening now, where the camel is inside the tent and we're outside shivering, going, "What the heck happened?" But it's not really us who did anything wrong. By us, I mean me, my generation. It's not so much the younger people or even some of the older people who did anything wrong. It's much more so the older generations, even farther back, who constantly consented to having more and more government programs. I mean, all the way back several hundred years ago, or however many years ago, when there started to be government education, where people went along with that and said, well, people do need to be educated, I suppose. And so it just went on from there. And then Social Security, where people said, well, I do want to have money when I get old instead of having to save up for myself, I suppose. So that's okay. And it just progresses on from there. And it keeps going farther and farther until we have a system where there's just complete control on the side of government. There's just complete and total control on the side of government. And it's unfortunate, but it is happening. It has been happening for a very long time, probably since the inception of government, actually. There started to be more and more control being taken, because that's just the nature of it. That's the nature of government. That's the nature of states, is they're going to take more control as time goes by. They're just going to. There's no way around it. Well, the NSA has been doing that for a very long time, and the people who run the NSA are upset that that people are starting to question their authority, because they don't actually have any. People are upset about the NSA. People are upset that their information is being stolen from them. And so they say, well, it's actually illegal. The Supreme Court has now determined, the appeals court has now determined, that the NSA's actions are illegal. But is that going to stop them? Probably not, because they don't care about the law. They have no reason to care about the law. Well, there's now this story that's coming out about a judge who ruled that NSA phone dragnet is illegal. But did he actually call Edward Snowden, former NSA contractor, Edward Snowden, a whistleblower? Ars Technica has a story saying, when a 3-judge federal appeals court ruled Thursday that the National Security Agency's telephone metadata snooping program was illegal, many took the occasion to say that the decision vindicated Edward Snowden, the former NSA contractor who disclosed the surveillance to The Guardian in 2013. So, I mean, we all knew that he didn't do anything wrong, but the government didn't really care about that. The government didn't know nor care that they did anything wrong. So it just kept on going with them saying that Edward Snowden is the worst person imaginable. And people were actually calling for Edward Snowden to be hanged. People wanted him to be strung up. People wanted him dead. And that's a scary thought when you think about it, because then that means anyone who ever questions government now needs to be dead, is the implication. And people were very upset. Well, Glenn Greenwald, the journalist who originally broke the telephone spying story with Snowden's documents, tweeted, maybe someone who reveals a secret program that multiple federal judges say is illegal is a whistleblower who deserves gratitude, not prison. Could it be? After all, he didn't actually do anything wrong, because if you point out that somebody is doing something illegal, that's not really wrong. So because the appeals court has determined that the NSA spy programs were actually illegal, wouldn't this then mean that Edward Snowden has nothing to fear because he didn't do anything wrong? Well, you'd think so. But keep in mind who runs the NSA. Keep in mind who is the government. It's people who are very upset at Edward Snowden for what he did. So probably he's going to have to stay in hiding. As much as it pains me to say it, Edward Snowden probably is going to have to stay in hiding for a very long time, at least until my generation gets in power, who's not very upset at him for doing what he did. And that'll be a long time from now. And I hate to say it, but Edward Snowden and I don't think are even in the same generation, because I'm a millennial and I'm pretty sure he's Gen X. So sorry, dude. Glenn Greenwald tweeted that he did what was right and not what was illegal. What he did was actually point out something that was wrong, something that was unjust. If I or you point out something that's unjust, you've done the just thing. You've done the right thing. So Edward Snowden did the just and right thing. But people who were called out don't see it that way. It's like if a thief gets caught and somebody says, hey, you're stealing. They say, oh, no, I'm not. Well, that's what's happening here. Information was stolen. The wrong thing was done. And the people who are caught are trying to defend themselves, saying that they did the right thing and that it was all in the best interests of the American people. So somehow stealing from me is the best thing for me. I had no idea. It's the parasite telling the host that the parasite's doing the right thing. That's exactly what's happening with this federal system we have now, where it's draining us of our cash, it's draining us of our resources, draining us of our free markets, and they're telling us that it's the right thing when it's really not. The solution is a free market, not a controlled economy, not controlled capitalism. Capitalism is right, controlled capitalism is not. Somebody who knows far more about that is David Toulis of Nuganomics.com. His show is coming up in just a few minutes right here on Hot News Talk Radio. That's AM 1240. Go to the website, hotnewstalkradio.com, get the TuneIn app and search for Hot News Talk Radio, and you can listen to us streaming live to your phone. Get half off right now. Go to Hot News Talk Radio and click on the half off link for great deals. This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of my...
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Surgery does not have to be financially painful. Hi, I'm Surgical Dr. David Red, and I'd like to invite you to my walk-in surgery clinic in North Shore. Quick Surge brings you immediate relief from moles, skin tags, maybe a laceration. Quick Surge. You walk in, fill out a mini form, I numb the area I'll treat, and before you know it, you're on your way home. Do I take insurance? No, because I take cash customers. I have super low and fixed prices, credit card, check, or cash. Uninsured? Member of the working financially disadvantaged? Choose Quick Surge. I publish prices online. No murk, just sunshine. Hassle-free, pain-free. Love the idea of a personal relationship with a doctor? Drop in with a nasty cut from work. Quick Surge. I'll take care of you. Quick Surge is a public center on the North Shore. No insurance hassles with Quick Surge. The national medical system is dysfunctional, overpriced, very alienating. I'm part of the solution, and so are you. Come on home. QuickSurge.com. QuickSurg. Relief.